In 1939, 14-year-old Zygmunt Bauman escaped the Nazi onslaught on Poland by fleeing to Russia. 5 years later, he returned as a convinced communist, working with the secret service of a Polish army fighting under Soviet command. After the war, he became an academic who gradually rejected the official version of Marxism. In 1968, during a state-sponsored anti-Semitic purge, he left Poland for Israel. As a non-Zionist, he was unhappy there, and in 1971 joined Leeds University, becoming one of their most illustrious professors. He has published more than 50 books, seeking to understand the society we live in, and in his 9th decade is still writing.
I'm dabbling in sociology now for almost 70 years, and I haven't learned a single skill which allows me to predict. Because if you look, learn the books about futurology, predicting the future, they consider methodological aspects of that very difficult job. And the interesting point, if you read quite a number of these books, there's a common denominator, sometimes made explicit, sometimes presumed tacitly, that what makes it so difficult to predict the future are the human beings, because they are unpredictable, because they are capricious, because they don't necessarily do what they should have been doing if, to achieve the best results. They act on passions, on emotions, on things like that. If you could remove human beings from human society, then it would be okay. We would be the same way able to predict what will happen as the chemist can predict what will happen in a test tube, during his experiments. Physicists, nuclear physicists working in cyclotron can predict the movement, the trajectory of the atoms or electrons or whatever. Unfortunately, it doesn't apply to human beings.
There have been quite a few people in the 20th century who've been quite keen about getting rid of people who get in their way.
Yeah. Yeah, well, but that makes the job of futurologist particularly nasty, really, and very often humiliating. And I remember when I still had regular students, and they were very nervous and preparing for exams, tense atmosphere. The good way to make them relax was to offer them some futurologist books, 20 years old. And then they laughed. So the tense atmosphere disappeared completely. The interesting, the crucial point is that of all the great, really great human destiny shaping and reshaping events of 20th century, not a single one had been predicted. They all came unexpected. Without any exception. I remember when Bolsheviks took Winter Palace, there was a little note in the Times, and I don't remember on which page, 20 page, or no one actually attached any importance. Another group of crazy people did something. Russia anyway is far away. So it doesn't affect what's happening here. Holocaust, still in 1943, the most intelligent and wise and far-sighted people in British government, all other statesmen of the West, didn't believe that there is a Holocaust going on. It's not just a question of prediction that something like that could happen in Europe, but even it was almost finishing already, still no one believes that that's happening in our Europe. A good example of this blindness towards future is, I wonder whether you remember, but you are at the age you could remember, Kremlinology. Do you remember Kremlinology? In history of science, that was probably the best financed and best provided for branch of scholarship. They had an enormous amount of institutes, conferences, funds, whatever is most needed, because that was a crucial point they are dealing with. Other branches of scholarship could look only with green with envy. How if we had the same amount of dollars or pounds for research, what we would be able to do. The interesting point that no one predicted that communism will end up by implosion and not by explosion. No one. At any particular point of time, we are unable to say which force, which tendency, which category of people, which political movement or whatever will impress its shape on future. Who can say? There are normally every majority started as minority. Every minority started as laughingly meager minority. At what point you can say that now, look, that's the future, which is brewing, somewhere growing, in Latin America, I don't know, in Philippines, and whatever. So I'm very strongly against the sport of forecasting.
Why do you think one of your colleagues, for example, then calls you a prophet of modernity, I believe you've been called? Did you dislike that
prophet of postmodernity, yes. But, well, I can identify with what he said, in a sense, because what I'm doing, I'm just trying to unravel, open up, and show, demonstrate the unpleasant aspects of the way we live, which we normally try to stifle, chase away from our consciousness, and play down. They are the minor discomforts of basically wonderful life, very much like after the recent credit crunch, as you know, when all politicians said that there were corrupted, a handful of corrupted bankers who created a way too greedy and so on. But no one actually pointed out that there is something basically essentially wrong with living on credit generally. And our civilization here in this part of the world lives on credit.
Can I pick you up on that? Did you ever envisage a scenario in which the world's bankers would go to the world states and demand taxpayers' money to carry on and to get it? And does that change the way you think about the power of the state fading away and the markets taking over? Is there something that raises a question in what's been going on in the crisis of 2008 and 9?
Believe me or not, I was not surprised at all. Jürgen Habermas, 40 years ago, he published a little book called Legitimation Crisis. Jürgen Habermas, very, very profound book. And at that time, I remember it made great impression on me. I learned a lot from it. What he said there is that, contrary to the popular, trivial rather, and simplified Marxist view, the state in liberal democracy is not an organ of capitalists. The legitimation of that state is to make capitalism possible, which is different from serving interests of just one class against the other. What does it mean to make it possible? That capitalism, 40 years ago, was still solid, modern, Ford-like kind of capitalism. The bulk was the beauty, the huge was the beauty, the more employees you had, the more important person you were, the more oil wells or railway tracks you possessed, you were bigger. All these foundations of greatness were immovable. They were very heavy, very solid. You couldn't pack up railways or oil wells and send them by internet to Indonesia, for example. You couldn't do that. You were tied to the place, right? And capitalism could reproduce itself under this condition by making the basic, essential, ever-repeated transaction which recreated capitalist relationships possible. What is this transaction? Meeting between capitalists and workers. Capital must be able to buy labor force, and labor must be able to be bought. That means must be attractive, must be in good health, basic skills possessed, literate, numerate, able to endure the challenges of factory floor, and the other aspect of Soviet modernity, also the battleground, because there was the compulsory army, the universal duty of serving in the army. What applied to factories applied also to the armies. The bigger they were, the better. There was tremendous panic in this country at the beginning of 20th century during Boer War, when the military recruitment committees failed about 50% of the potential recruits because they were underfed, illiterate, unable to endure the soldierly life. So two things. One had to keep workers in relatively good condition, so they will be a tasty bit to buy and swallow and digest. And one had to pipe prime the capital ventures in order to enable them to go on buying labor. If that wouldn't happen, then that would be a catastrophe. Because of that, we had welfare state, really, because welfare state serves precisely this purpose. Investment in labor force, investment in workers was beyond left and right. Everybody considered that a good investment, because the more workers there were employed and the more soldiers there were waiting in reserve for the next war, the more powerful the country is, the nation. Basic transaction which keeps capitalism today going is not any longer the act of buying labor force by capitalists, but the act, what they encounter, the meeting between the consumer full of desires and the credits. The credits, the means to act on their desires, to satisfy their desires, their wants. Now, if the former legitimation of the state required acting in two directions, capitalists and workers, the state should take care of the finances of the industrialists. On the other hand, you should take care also of the ability, working ability, soldiering ability of the hoi polloi, of the ordinary folks like you and me. In this new constellation, that's not longer necessary, because who are the unemployed people, rejected people, whom I described in the book called Wasted Life. Who are they? They are simply flawed consumers. You can speak about reserve army of labor, but you really can't speak about reserve army of consumers. It's stupid, you know. Either you have money and you can go to supermarket and fill your pockets, or you are not, or you don't. Then there is nothing to do. If you pump money into those flawed consumers, the result will be they will buy their necessities, and necessities are not profitable for the consumer society. They are the least interesting things. You know, you can't make a fortune on it. So stockholders won't be interested particularly. But obligation towards the credit side of this encounter remains. This new version of pump priming still is obligation of the state. If you look how state reacted to credit crunch, the major phrase used by every politician, starting from Gordon Brown, ending with Obama, you know, and Sarkozy, and Merkel, we need to recapitalize the banks to enable them again to lend money. That was the whole point, you know. And that's what has been done. The result is that banks give credit again, slowly, but start doing it again. And people are taking loans, borrowing money, becoming debtors again. But this time they are eating up the life necessities of their grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and so on. Believe me, well, I'm not a mathematician, but I'm just an ordinary person without particular knowledge of arithmetics. But until credit crunch, I never heard the word trillion.
Never heard the word?
Trillion. Billions were already astronomical figures. Now, trillion here, trillion there. Where from they come? Well, they come mostly from famished Chinese people. They have dictatorship; they can afford it. You know, they don't have to count on electors, and so they can actually keep their standards of living down in order to lend money to America to finance their opulent consumption. But these are debts going into debt, you know, and so will have to be repaid at some point. So I was not surprised. I did expect exactly this sort of reaction. I expected the reaction, recapitalize the banks, getting the borrowing and lending going again, because that is on which consumer society of our times is based. Take it away, and it all collapses. Now there is a book which is called Living on Borrowed Time. It is a product of long conversation with a Mexican lady, Mexican sociologist, Citlali Rovirosa Mondrazo. And one of the questions was precisely what you asked a moment ago: is the state becoming again more powerful? In what way? It starts struggling, desperate, starts to perform its function, which it did perform, better or worse, from the start of modern era, 200 years, 250 years, and so on. The pre-modern state was called by Ernst Gellner, the late sociologist of very high stature, sociologist, anthropologist, philosopher. He called the pre-modern state the dentistry state. Dentistry state. What he meant is it specializes in extraction by torture, like every dentist. What extraction of what? Extraction of surplus value by taxes. Tributes, taxes, all sorts of things. But the state was not interested, private state was not interested in producing surplus. That was private affair. It was an affair of the landlords, of barons, of individual peasants, of craftsmen in their workshops, and so on. That was not a matter for the state. And the great upheaval of modern times is that the state entered the picture. It is not only extracting by torture the products of other people's work, but it actually actively creates conditions for this work to be done. And take it away, the kind of modern economy would not exist a few days even. It will be impossible, inconceivable. And it hasn't changed. It is happening all the time. The problem which you mentioned, that quoting me, that the state is giving away many of its functions. Yes, it does. It does. It's transferring them to the market, hoping that invisible hand or the finger of providence, will take care of it somehow. Transferring to the market sideways means exempting these functions from political democratic control, because markets are by definition free from political interference. Why the state is doing that? Well, partly because this two-sided rejuvenation, recreation, reproduction of the capitalist relationships is no longer necessary, because this basic, essential act crucial for this recreation, reproduction, is no longer meeting of labor and capital, but meeting of a bank and the borrower. But state transfers functions to the market sideways and downwards. It trickles them down to what is called by Anthony Giddens life politics. Life politics is politics conducted by human individuals like you and me. The individual is expected to use his individual mind, individual stamina, individual guts, in order to find individual solutions to social problems. So downwards, trickling down, and sideways to the market. But this movement and that movement are happening for the same reason, for reason of the existence of the third direction, upwards. And third direction consists in power evaporating from politics upwards into the global space, multinationals, which are the forces which are really globalized at the moment, genuinely globalized. Not politics, not jurisdiction, not law, not democratic control, not representation of public opinion, not these things. The only forces which have been genuinely globalized are forces which ignore the boundaries, ignore the local laws, take them very lightly, and do whatever they can, and quite successfully, to violate them. What are these forces? Capitals, finances, trade, information, criminality, drug smuggling, weapon trade, and things like that. They are genuinely global now. Now, what's happening when you take power out of politics? Politics cannot do simply as much as it did before, because politics has not been globalized. We don't have any global political organs, any global political, global law, global courts, nothing. Global way, institutionalized way of expressing public mood and public preferences and so on. Nothing. So politics is, as before, local, tied to the ground. And it can't reach the powers out there, because if you try, they will simply move into another place. If situation is too hot here in Yorkshire, well, they will find many other places where conditions will be much more agreeable, people will be much more willing to cooperate. So power evaporated, and therefore the state is not able to responsibly pretend that they can do all these sort of things. They have to shift it away or downwards. And that's exactly what's happened. Nothing has changed at the moment. Nothing has changed at the moment. The apparent return to the restoration of the power of the state, which you mentioned, this impression comes from the fact that every government taxes their own taxpayers, but obviously, why? Because there is no world government who can tax everybody equally. So in order to recapitalize banks, which are global, you need to use your local taxpayers. There are no others.
You use very tough language in your book about the poor. You say they are waste, they are useless. Where are they going?
England, Britain, is one of the most unequal societies in the world by all statistics. It's a gangrene of a sort of society, because it's not true that poverty destroys only the impoverished. According to all research which I had chance of scrutinizing, the more unequal society is, the more, the greater and the more numerous are all sorts of social ailments, social ills. Not just the situation of the poor people, but for instance, even things like premature pregnancy, the teenage pregnancy, or the incidence of depression, of psychological ailments, and so on, is greater in unequal societies. The more unequal society, the more things that go up. And then there are impacts which are difficult to measure in figures, like, for example, the feeling of uneasiness among ordinary people, not poor people, rich people as well, and middle-class people particularly, who are suspended between these two extremes, the hopes, the dreams of advancing to stockbrokers in the city. On the other hand, the nightmare about cutting reduction and or outsourcing, as it is called, rationalizing or whatever, which will find them losing their position, social position, their privileges, and becoming relegated and humiliated at the same time. So the feeling of uneasiness, of anxiety, what I describe in the book about liquid fear, fears which are unanchored, which are just floating, but you can't put your finger on it. Sometimes you unload this fear and anxiety on the nearest target, completely in no connection with the sources of the fear. For example, pedophile has been released from prison and lives somewhere in the next street, So then you unleash your pent-up fury and hoping that if you get rid of the different skin color people who are walking in your street, that they were not here 20 years ago, now they are here, if you think that you put in jail every criminal, every obtrusive beggar on the street and so on, then suddenly the reasons for being afraid will vanish. It's not true. We are so passionate about this shifting targets of our animosity, hatred, and pent-up energy, precisely because the real sources of our anxiety are untouchable. They are there. They are all the time there. And you can do whatever you like with locking up the illegal immigrants, or however you call them, asylum seekers, false asylum seekers, criminal asylum seekers. You can lock up all the pedophiles and so on, and the sources will be as profuse and as lively as before. We come nowhere near touching the ultimate reasons for being afraid. There's no shortcuts here. We are confronting probably nothing short of huge cultural upheaval, cultural evolution, and changing the idea of happiness, changing idea of the sense of life, changing idea of successful life, and so on. For the time being, we are watching apprenticeship,
The Apprentice.
Sugar, yeah. The Apprentice, or Big Brother. They are absolutely the same message is conveyed by them, namely that every week somebody must be kicked out. That's a law of nature. That's beyond dispute. And the only problem is who will be, me or him. So the message is absolutely anti-solidarity message. You can't gain by cooperating. On the contrary, Hobbes posthumously has right, bellum omnium contra omnes, everybody is at each other's throat, each one for himself, and devil takes the hindmost, right? So this message, now with this sort of popular culture, which is supported virtually by educators in business schools, by mass media, by tabloids, and by politicians, most of them anyway. Whatever you do about mitigating fear would be ineffective. You can unload your fury for a few hours, but that's what you can do. If you really beat up some homosexuals in vicinity or some black boys in your neighborhood, then you feel better, or go to the football match, and kick the fans of the other team. For several hours it's okay, but after Saturday or Sunday, Monday again, reality, and again you don't know, you have no idea whether you won't be suddenly told that thank you very much, but we don't need your services any longer, and or your partner may tell you, I need more space, let's take a break, suddenly they are fully in their rights to do so, so you can do nothing about it. Developers who come to your cherished area which you loved, you were born in Leeds, there are beautiful places probably you want to visit. Developers came and destroyed them completely. From very comfortable, very pleasant, cozy places, they are now transferred into alien, hostile, locked up from you, gated places.
Do you see this mood of the apprentice eviction scenario? It sounds to me like you're talking something like about a reversion to social Darwinism, in which the right thing is to go ahead yourself, literally devil take the hindmost, because the only way you're going to survive is by kicking the other person down, and you're actually failing in your duty to yourself and those around you if you don't kick them down? Have we really reverted?
That's a very important thing you said. In America, books which are in recent years regularly on the bestseller list, sell millions of copies, are books explaining to people why they should avoid, as much as they can, becoming dependent on others. If you dedicate your life to somebody else, you put hostages to the fate, and you find yourself dependent, losing your own freedom, and so on and so on. The books do that by trying to pass and hammer home the message that other people are like that. They don't care about you. So you should do it both ways. First of all, don't allow yourself to become dependent on others by caring on them. And the second, don't allow yourself to become dependent on others by accepting their care for you. You have to stand on your own feet. Teams are okay as long as they help your advancement. But there always comes a moment, next week, the week after, depending how many weeks is one installment of Big Brother. But comes a moment when the team from the asset become a liability. You have to carry them on their shoulders. And look, they are nice to you today because they need you, but tomorrow they will abandon you. And no one would shed tears when you are kicked out. So this is the set of crucial problems which we are facing now. The direction in which we have developed in recent several dozens of years is pregnant with tremendous dangers, really. And short of doing something about it, which is not utopia, because humanity has changed itself many times in the history, so why not this time? And probably will be helped as well by necessities, by food becoming short in supplying, by trillions needed to be repaid, and things like that. Sociology, particularly in Anglo-Saxon countries, not in Germany, not in France, but in Anglo-Saxon countries, emerged as a service institution for the managers, all sorts of managers, warfare bureaucracy, welfare bureaucracy, state institutions, owners of factories, questions why people rebel and what to do them from stop rebelling, for example. Why people organize guerrilla units and how to prevent emergence of guerrilla units. Technical, managerial issues, administrative issues. Sociology was developed from the office of the general manager of a big enterprise. That was this perspective. Now the problem is that the one of the changes with the passage from solid to liquid modernity is that managers don't want to manage any longer. They much prefer, and they do it quite successfully again, to re-establish relations with their subordinates on contractual basis, on market-like basis. You show me your results and I will keep you, or if you don't, then I will kick you, this sort of thing. So they are not interested any longer in this sort of knowledge. I don't bewail this change, but anyway, that's the fact. If you see for what the big companies pay thousands of pounds in order to send their promising employees for 2 weekend refreshing courses, They are not going there to study the science of organization, science of management. They go there to study spontaneity, the art of discovering inner potential, this sort of thing, self-development. So there, in United States of America, because of that, there was a few years ago there was an alarm among sociologists that sociology is losing its contact with public arena, because they understood the kind of contact which sociologists can have with public arena as pandering to the needs of the managers. When managers disappear, they not interested any longer in this sort of service. Why should they bother themselves with preventing strikes if they can change the labor law, for example, and shift responsibility of someone else? So if they strike, okay, we go to another country, and that's the end of the story. Unlike Ford, who doubled his workers' wages because he wanted to keep them in his factory. The point was that the workers were dependent on Henry Ford, on their livelihood. But Ford was dependent on his workers for his wealth. So dependency was mutual. Now it is one-sided. Managers are not any longer dependent on a particular body of labor. We are, all of us, now, forced, decreed, pushed, prodded, persuaded to find individual solutions to individual problems. Well, to give you one example of CAF, really, take younger generation, younger not only than me, but even than you, teenagers today. They, for example, will tell you that they have 1,500 friends because they belong to Facebook. It's very easy to have friends there. I don't think that in all my life I collected 1,500, but they do it in one evening, in one sitting in front of a computer. To analyze the idea of friendship, to explain what the friends are for, what is the difference between the kind of friends who are listed on the Facebook website and the friends which hold hands together, and who are there when they are needed most, and with as Ray Paul, another sociologist in Britain, called the convoy through the turbulent waters of life. Group virtually disappeared from vocabulary of younger generations. They never experienced that. What they say normally is network, right? Network. Group is something to which you belong, but you don't belong to network because network exists only through the constant activity of connecting and disconnecting. That's the beauty of network. Again, it's something different. Which has its advantages, which I am quite frank about. Yes, it has advantages, because if the situation becomes unpleasant, you can always switch off, go away. So it is, in a sense, facilitating your life problems. But being tied to a group, being member, all that, had also its advantages, which network doesn't. Things like reliability, predictability, security, and things like that. I am simplifying at the moment in the short statement, but it's roughly what I have in mind. That to widen the options. That's the task of sociology, in my view. To widen the set of possibilities which people are aware that they are there. That not following blindly the latest fashion and the latest innovation, but trying to put them in a wider perspective. One topic which I'm virtually obsessed to the point of repeating myself in different ways in successive books is the dialectics of security and freedom. Both are absolutely necessary in human life. And, if you go too far towards security, what you achieve is serfdom, slavery, actually. And when you go too far in direction of freedom, you achieve complete chaos, instability, fragility, frailty, brittleness of life. So.
No. I'm just saying, but there is another side to the Facebook and the group scenario, isn't it? That if you are in a poor ethnic area, you have gangs, you have a religion, you actually create a different sort of group, and they are in some respects becoming stronger, and they get a situation of power, and that power, I would suggest, is in some ways stronger than the power that exists on a network.
Yes, but I'm aware of that, and I'm very careful to point it out, really, that a liquid context creates two contradictory tendencies. One is enjoyment of your individuality, autonomy, and making as much joy and fun as possible out of it. And the other is, on the contrary, people who feel strongly about security, about being well settled in society, having an identity which is respected, recognized, and acknowledged. They have fundamentalist dreams, and liquid modernity is the time of rejuvenation of all sorts of fundamentalism. I grew up under conditions where the general belief was that we have our representatives sitting in parliament, we have government, that's our collective power, collectivity, community, and I will do it. Very few people believe that. And even if they tell you that that's the case, they are probably the agents of some political party or private secretaries of the candidate for ministry or whatever, but not their electors, not their constituents. And for example, when we discuss about ecological problems, which is the planet, exhaustion of resources and so on, again, we agreed what is to be done, but there is no force to do it. That's the problem. I make a wager on ordinary people, and not on organized forces, because they are even United Nations has been created after the Second World War with one briefing, one major task to perform, to defend tooth and nail the undetachable, indivisible sovereignty of every state. Now that's precisely the point which disables us. There's precisely something which prevents us from getting planetary issues in order. Precisely this fiction of the sovereignty of the state. This fiction, because no state, even United States of America, is really sovereign at the moment. Depends on the wealth markets, on stupid Al-Qaeda, a handful of terrorists. They make the whole country tremble and reshape their laws, their procedure because of that. So no one is really sovereign. There's no problem about that. But I believe that the clear-minded, the thinking men and women, sooner or later, you use the concept uphill struggle. Uphill struggle is not only to find contents in books, but to find meaning in life. That's the worst uphill struggle. They will contact this uphill struggle, and eventually they will find some ways of doing it. And I think that when it actually happens, I won't live long enough to see it, but you hopefully will. If it happens, one thing I can be sure about is that it will be unlike any previous solution which was practiced in humanity. There will be something very different. My beloved illustration of this belief is Aristotle being invited to Westminster, to House of Commons, and sitting there for the whole session, and what his reaction would be. Well, I hypothesize that, first of all, he would enjoy it. He liked, sharp discussion, debate, like it. Yes, he would enjoy it tremendously. But then someone will come and tell him, look, Mr. Aristotle, that's democracy. Democracy? It would never occur to me. Because he was actually a man who coined the concept. But for him, democracy was people coming to the marketplace, quarreling, buttonholing each other, debating, and coming to agreed solutions. A direct, conversation between people, free people, that's democracy. And of course, idea like representative democracy would be completely incomprehensible for me. What does mean representative? How can you transfer your rights and your responsibilities to somebody else? So, we have done one jump, enormous leap at the threshold of the modern era, and now we are facing another leap. To marry again power and politics, because they were married under modern, solid modernity in nation state. They lived together. They quarreled sometimes between each other, but like in every married couple, they quarrel, then they agree, and they love each other, sometimes they hate each other. They lived together and they complemented each other. Now power went away, and politics is divorced, abandoned. How do you call it? Decree nisi has been already given, I think. So I think the challenge today is remarry them. But they can't be remarried again at the level of nation state, because globalization went already too far past the point of no return. We can't cancel our interdependency on the planet. We are all interdependent. Whatever happens in one place has impact on a faraway place and so on. That's done. So, new marriage, also made in heaven, like, this nation state was made in heaven once upon a time, must be done at the level of planet.
It almost sounds as if you're suggesting an anarchical process in...
Yes, I know. I think that this is just a good description of the impossibility of straightlining, straightening up, the condition of humanity. It is internally controversial, really. I mentioned before relationship between security and freedom. I believe I live very long. I went through several social systems and so several very different, radically different conditions. And I came to the conclusion that there is no perfect balancing between freedom and security. In every settlement, there will be something outstanding. So it's like pendulum. We go all the way towards freedom, and then we start dreaming about security. We go all the way towards security, and then Orwell will be paralyzed with fear that the soldier's boot will trample human face. So it's one way or the other all the time. It is actually, it's not a linear progress. What we have is really rather a movement of pendulum. So there are contradictions in what I'm saying, and I don't have solutions to them.
Has your concept of justice changed? What is it about justice now, in the world we're in now?
Justice in all eras was a hotly contested issue. People accepted part of their sufferings as the verdict of God, part of divine creation, or law of nature, or law of history. Whatever, however they called it, there's always the same problem. It doesn't depend on human will. It must be like that. One has to surrender and obey. And what in particular ought to be surrendered to and obeyed has changed all the time along human history. Quite recently, just to give you one example, idea of marital rape. 30 years ago, every woman knew that it is in the nature of things that husband has sexual rights to his wife. But this principle has been thrown again into the melting pot. Why? On what ground? Why it should be like that? Why should it be like that? And from the category of necessity, the issue was transferred to the category of violence. And that's how understanding of justice changes over time. That is the mechanism. And I gave you one example, but if we sat here longer, I would give you hundreds of that, because that's the procedure which goes on repeating itself over and over again. So I was thinking all my life, and particularly since modernity and the Holocaust, because that's when I learned about the existence of Levinas and his ethical problems and so on, I came to the conclusion at the end of my life, with one foot in grave, that just society has only one definition. Just society is a society which doesn't believe that it is just enough. But if you want description of just society, I can't give it to you, because 10 years after my death, it will be very different, and I hope so. Our demands are growing. We demand more and more.
So do you still see us as being on a journey then? Are we still chasing after some form of utopia?
Well, that's again in the nature of humanity, really, that I told you, for example, that you can't find, in my considered presently view, perfect balance, not causing any objections, perfect balance between security and freedom. But on the other hand, I am absolutely convinced that people will never stop seeking such a balance. I believe that there is no such thing as once and for all, for eternity, just society, but I believe deeply that people will never stop looking for it. That's my hope. There are pessimists and there are optimists. You know the difference between them? The optimist thinks that this is the best possible world. And the pessimist suspects that the optimist may be right. So I reject both optimism and pessimism. But I think that there is a third category, men hoping. I would like to classify myself like that. I really believe that there are enormous quantity, volumes of possibilities which humanity haven't explored yet. Other ways of life, alternative ways of life. Alternative society is possible. I disagree sharply with Margaret Thatcher, mostly because of her slogan, "There is no alternative." Tina.
Do you still call yourself a socialist?
Oh yes. Oh yes, I understand. By socialism I understand two principles. One principle is that it is obligation of community to provide collectively endorse insurance for individual mishaps, individual ill fortune. It's not a private matter, individual misfortune, but it's a communal matter. And the second principle is that in the same way as you do not measure the carrying power of a bridge by the average strength of its pillars, but you measure the carrying power of the bridge by the carrying power of the weakest pillar, right? The same principle should be followed in assessment of the quality of life in a society. Not shouldn't be judged by average income per head, but by the weakest part, by the condition of the weakest part. These two principles are socialist principles, to my mind. And again, I'm sorry for repeating myself all the time, but you push me to it. I don't believe that there is such a thing as socialist society, but I believe that socialism is a push. If you accept these two principles, then you are constantly energized, to do something about this weakest pillar and about insuring people against their individual mishaps. That's it.